Welcome again to another edition of Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and this week we have a special treat for our listeners. Welcome, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Thank you for speaking to us.
Oh, I'm delighted to join you today. It's nice to see and hear you, Inez.
We're on the fourth floor, and this is our first mobile podcast. So let's start by discussing what you just recently finished, which was the legislative session. What were your successes?
I like to really brag about that. I mean, around the country, executive leaders and their legislatures, really are at different ends of the spectrum, even when it's the same party elected in the majority. And aligning those priorities can be challenging. The vast majority of our agenda was supported by the legislatures. This is a great place for me to tell them thank you. We passed a $10.5 billion budget with a lot of that going to healthcare and building an adequate network for New Mexicans and our growing workforce, sufficient funds to meet the growing challenges in behavioral health, which is healthcare and homelessness. We got $20 million for that, and I think it's going to take a lot more than that, but it's a really good start. And then I really leaned in to a robust public safety agenda, and while I had at least 22 bills, look, we got 2 gun bills, and in the West, frankly anywhere right now, that is charged with political emotion and doesn't really lend itself even here to enough of the evidence-based discussions about gun violence and the epidemic I think that the country and the state is in. But we also got some criminal penalty enhancements to deal with public safety, and we have a no bond hold for serious repeat offenders. All in all, I would tell you, you add that to a conservation fund and robust tax credits for renewable energy, the vast majority of our agenda was met.
And going back to the gun bills, I remember talking to Majority Leader Worth a few weeks ago, and he said to pass anything in an election year, was almost a miracle.
I always have a different attitude, right? It doesn't matter whether it's an election year or not. These are issues that are important to New Mexicans. But he does, particularly here, Leader Worth is spectacularly good at providing the minority members of that chamber a productive role so that we have more bipartisan bills. More bipartisan bills mean that they will stand the test of time. People won't be trying after every election to repeal them. It is a very productive strategy that creates real stability. In an election year with a minority set of colleagues who want no more gun violence measures of any kind. They see them as too many restrictions on responsible rights of gun owners. We think we're threading that balance very effectively. He's right, and he did an amazing job. But as a governor, I'm very concerned. I mean, the number one cause of death for children is gun violence. And as long as that's the case in New Mexico and in America, I'm going to fight like hell to do as much gun violence prevention as we can.
Is there a place for bringing the minority and the majority together outside of politics, outside of a legislative session, to start coming up with strategies like maybe teaching gun safety, whether, through Boy Scouts or at schools, or, giving away gun safes to people, or, instead of Stephanie Lord giving away a gun, she could give away a gun and a gun safe. What can we do together that's not based in law, but perhaps based in attitude and practice that would improve our gun safety record?
Well, all of those are great ideas, and that a little bit more formally, that's what the interim process is for, is to be a little more open-minded about strategies that don't require legislation, but you're hearing from the general public. We already do that. I mean, we put a ton of money into training, whether that's through Game and Fish. We have a gun lock and gun safety storage program. That was met with bipartisan support. You have these sort of extreme outliers that pile onto that, but there's no question that if we do more podcasts like this, that we can be in a position to create healthy dialogues about the strategies that make the most difference. And I think that the state can benefit from that, and I think the whole country, quite frankly, could turn the temperature down, particularly on talking about public safety and gun violence in general.
Yeah, one of the things that just as a person scares me is all the people I know who buy a gun for protection. And that's great. And then they put it in their purse or in their pocket and they don't learn how to use it. They don't store it properly. And they're always doing something stupid like shooting their finger or accidentally, hitting their neighbor. And they always say, law-abiding gun owners aren't to blame. Well, if you're a dope, you are to blame. And I think we have so many guns in circulation. How do you
You've
push
hit the
that
nail,
back?
in my opinion, right on the head. We had a tragedy while I was governor with a law enforcement officer. This is someone who's highly trained, and we're all human, and had a firearm out in plain sight. Toddler got it. Toddler lost his life. So we have two major issues. Accidents happen unless we are really careful and really stringent about our actions when that gun isn't being lawfully carried in a responsible way. And two, these guns get stolen when they're not in storage and locked appropriately. And the vast majority of guns in the hands of young people, as an example, are stolen firearms. They're getting them on the internet and in nefarious ways. There are far too many guns. And to your point, this conversation, I have no doubt, will lead to more New Mexicans buying firearms. And I have no problem with someone who passes a background check, has now the 7-day waiting period, and lawfully, legally, and appropriately accesses a firearm. But are they trained, and can we mitigate human mistakes? And there's so much more work that needs to be done there. And I worry that in New Mexico in particular, we have a lot of firearms in the hands of a lot of folks who aren't equipped or trained in order to use them safely.
Yeah, I know. I agree. We are a family that regularly goes shooting together, and when you see a group of teenage boys drinking while they're shooting in the Caja, you're like, okay, we're going to leave now and hope that no one gets killed, and we'll see it in the news tomorrow.
Yeah, it's tragic, and it's an area that whether I'm governor or not, because we know that I won't be in just under 3 years.
Counting down. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I know you. I tease about that. These jobs are incredibly hard, and for everyone who's thinking about it, I want them to be really clear that it's a really hard, tough job. I mean, this morning I had a conversation, with a recent widow. These are really hard jobs that have moments of significant pain for the people that you're supposed to protect and support. But it's a fabulous job with huge opportunities to make a difference for places that you love and people that you care about. But I know that America's gun violence issues are going to take a whole lot of dedicated men and women who continue to lean in to do everything we can until America does not have the number 1 gun violence problem of any country.
Exceptionalism.
It is, and it just, so it's going to take all of us. So I'm dedicated to these issues for as long as I can.
And on that, we'll take a short break and be back in a moment with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham.
Thanks, Inez. This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez. Great local content is only possible with a talented staff dedicated to bringing you the best local content possible. For that staff to do its work, we need your support by subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. And if not, there's never been a better time to subscribe. In addition to our home-delivered newspaper that comes with full digital access, we also provide digital-only subscriptions for SantaFeNewMexican.com. We'll also be releasing more online-only audio and video programming moving forward. The Santa Fe New Mexican has been here for nearly 175 years, and we want to continue being your source for local news and information. Visit us at SantaFeNewMexican.com/subscribe or call us at 505-986-3010. Thank you.
It's a new day in New Mexico, and the doors to boundless opportunity are open as tens of thousands of New Mexicans reach higher to pursue a dream, broaden their horizons, and retrain for a better job. With the New Mexico Lottery and Opportunity Scholarships, you could build yourself a better future anywhere in the state. You put in the hard work, we'll help with the costs. For eligibility details, visit reachhighernm.com.
Welcome back to Conversations Different. We are talking to Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham in her office high on the fourth floor in the Roundhouse. And it is exciting to be here on our first mobile podcast. So if you guys hear strange noises, it's because this is a busy place, lots of meetings, lots of stuff going on. I want to go back to the session just one more time. You talked about some of the funds that we are investing in. The phrase I heard was, let's use today's dollars for tomorrow. So talk about like the legacy fund and other ways that New Mexico is using the oil and gas surplus in the budget to make sure that we can do the things we need to do in the future.
For a decade or more. Well, let's talk about a couple. One that didn't happen in this session, but is the beneficiary by expanding and getting legislative authority to spend money from the Early Childhood Care and Education Trust Fund. I mean, that started with really $300 million, and it's now well over $8 billion. So we know that we can do universal support for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, frankly, forever. Smart investing, smart saving, and smart spending so that we're giving kiddos and their families the services they need. Same thing with home visiting and universal childcare. Now, we're not quite there because we have to build up the infrastructure so that we've got childcare, high-quality childcare at every community.
And that's teachers and also buildings and places to host them.
The whole
it's
thing.
Everything.
And all that money is set aside in a meaningful way. And so is the Land of Enchantment Conservation Legacy Fund. It's a one of a kind. It's now got 300 plus million. In the same way, if you're smart, and we will be, that thing grows to billions of dollars. And the point is to create a conservation effort to protect lands and access to them in a meaningful way for generations of New Mexicans for 100 years or longer. We did that by putting infrastructure money aside and matching funds to make sure that we're leveraging federal funds first and then getting them out there so that we know that we can fix roads and bridges and dams, not just this year, but we can do it for a decade out. So there are a ton of examples, including the legislature put together a fund that allows them to think about pilot programs and initiatives in a way that include their direct engagement in the well-being and improvement of quality of life in their own communities. So New Mexico has really been very thoughtful, and we've been really leaning forward. We are the envy of many states. I mean, we fully funded our pensions. Most states are underwater. California's got a budget deficit. We are really being thoughtful about where these funds go and how we can use them. Last thing, oil and gas, as everyone knows, second largest producer in the country. That's going to continue for a bit longer. And I don't know what the prices of oil are going to be or not going to be. I don't have a crystal ball. But it's responsible for about half now of the state's budget, still sizable as a one sector. But that's smaller, that footprint, than it's ever been, because all of our economic sectors are overperforming. And collectively, from tourism to aerospace to trade and ag and renewable energy, are performing twice the national average and catapulting New Mexico into one of the top states for any of those industries, whether that's film or renewable energy. And that's the future of the state. I think the future of the state in terms of a gangbuster economy really is that diversification. And frankly, renewable energy, advanced energy, is going to be the thing that makes New Mexico a lead economic powerhouse for another 50 years.
Well, we have sun and wind, and we especially
Geothermal.
Yes,
And
that's
I
right.
hope, and
Yep.
not everyone's on board, but look, hydrogen seems to me to be a very effective transition, particularly if you create policies and programs that get you to the lowest carbon footprint. When you do that with hydrogen, you aren't just talking about using natural gas in a hydrogen process. You're talking about a number of ways to do that move away from oil and gas kinds of assets. So I'm really a big fan of that as a piece of the renewable energy and energy transition aspects for the state.
That's actually a kind of an interesting area, because you have, obviously your fans in the clean energy, renewable energy, environmental group, and then they get really, really mad at you. And one of the things they have not liked is they're not a fan of hydrogen because they think it's just a way to greenwash gas and other things.
It's a hard line, and we need these advocates. I mean, that's how you get policy making to be meaningful. But these same advocates have no transition, certainly didn't lean into geothermal, don't like transmission lines, which means you can't get green electrons actually onto a grid so that we're using them, didn't get or advocate for infrastructure money to really do what we need to do in community solar, although that's now coming, and would like to just end oil and gas. And while on paper, or any day that my fairy godmother allows me to change the world, I could lean into that as a number one aspect. But because I can't do that, because it's not realistic, I'm looking for every place that builds a clean, cleaner, productive, safe economy for the future that creates transitions, because no state needs to do more in terms of our carbon footprint in ag and transportation per capita than New Mexico. So we have to lean in here. And I think that we're seeing more environmental experts lean into pieces of the hydrogen advanced market. Taos County is going to, they're going to be completely off in their views of oil and gas, including at night in their rural electric co-op. But hydrogen is in their mix. And when you think of Taos, you don't think of Taos as a place, and it would just only be solar and a little wind. It's going to be a bit more all of the above. So as people really start to utilize their environmental expertise, they're seeing there's a role here.
Yeah, that co-op is Kit Carson Co-op.
Let's give them a shout out.
They have done an amazing job.
I agree with you, and I will tell you, they haven't done it yet, but look no further than Taos to do better in their landfills. And our clean fuel standard, which we talked about in the first segment of this podcast, in this context, did we get a lot done in this session? We did. We joined only other 4 states to have a clean fuel standard. That is, from a policy-making standpoint, a heavy lift. It took us also 4 years, so the vast majority of my administration, to get that upstairs and signed. But look, that's going to allow us to have less waste go to landfills, which means less methane. I think landfills can also do more microbe investment and ag investments to reduce their methane footprint. And if you've got a big old diesel truck, you can be using biodiesel without changing any of that engine, which means we're lowering that transportation footprint. That's a big darn deal.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get there that people don't think about. The community college here has the only community college in the country with a degree in algae. And one of the things they're learning there is how algae can be used to get rid of methane waste at dumps, and also to turn into fuel. And it's just like this whole new scientific world that we're not there yet.
And with our evaporation rates and our water aspects, and frankly, maybe you'll ask me about the strategic water supply idea, the being able to grow algae in brackish water around the state would be another remarkable effort at reducing our climate footprint, carbon footprint, but also using innovation for a brand new economic viable sector.
On that note, we will be back in a moment with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham.
My name is Maria Jose Rodriguez Cadiz, and I am the Executive Director with Solace Sexual Assault Services. Our mission is to prevent sexual violence and empower survivors of sexual violence through restoring dignity, strength, and resiliency. For almost 51 years, Solace has reduced the impact of sexual violence. We do it by focusing on human rights, social justice, hope, and dignity. We believe survivors are experts in their own experiences and acknowledge that empowering them is crucial to their healing. Our advocacy, forensic interviewing, and therapy services are centered to their needs. Our sexual violence prevention programs in schools and community is just as important. Please check our website at findsolace.org. And if in need, you can call our 24/7 hotline, which is 800-721-7273. Your support is crucial to the lives of survivors. Thank you. Gracias.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. At the end of last session, you hinted that perhaps you weren't done with legislative work this year. Have you made a decision about whether to call a special session? And if so, what would it be about?
I haven't, but I'm 80-20. So, and I have certainly given that information to the legislative leadership. What I'm really worried about, that I think we had a chance to deal with in the 30-day session, is that our growing high-risk issues like homelessness require interventions, and open substance abuse and related, it's not always related, but can be, to theft and retail crime, that gets so large at some point that there isn't a strategy that attenuates that risk for the general public or people who are living unhoused themselves. We just put risk.
Of most crimes more than they are the criminals.
That is true. I believed it was true before there was empirical evidence. And so, yes, we have an obligation to do something about it. And the longer you wait, the more challenging that becomes. And I'm seeing it unfold all across the state. No place is exempt. So the three things in particular that can mitigate that risk and provide compassion and respect to all of us in that setting are three things. One, it's called criminal competency. That means for folks who are repeatedly in front of a judge for a crime. Could be misdemeanors, could be a felony. So repeated retail crime, that have a serious mental health issue and or substance abuse issue as well, can be placed in care at an appropriate behavioral health clinic or facility, largely inpatient, by adjudication, and it's called criminal competency. Because what they do now is you say, would you rather go to jail or do you want to be placed in an outpatient program? Well, yes, people choose outpatient programs, but they don't go. And if they go, they don't stay. And that judge sees you again 2 weeks later. So we're on this horrible, merry-go-round we can't get off. And when you talk to police, they will tell you, well, there's nothing we can do about it. So then they stop arresting, even when they've got a clear crime. Nobody does anything, so we just stall out. You can't do that. Judges want this tool. They can meaningfully use it, and I thought we were making progress, sufficient progress in the 30-day. Second bill was not introduced in the 30-day, but watching what's going on around the country, including in California, they have a meaningful civil commitment. So it's sort of the civil counterpart to that. Think about parents with a 20-year-old living on the streets who's got a significant mental health issue and a chemical dependency issue as well. They can't commit them, they can't do anything, and they're not volunteering.
Take a hold of an adult relative that is in a mess and can't help themselves.
And these would be for, say, 90 days with one more 90-day commitment or competency placement. It's tough legislation, but it can be done, and we're seeing really good examples. The thing that California did as well that I'm very interested in, and of course it's been upheld as constitutional so far, so all of these are great, is they create a real runway for providers to do behavioral health, and local governments have to be part of these solutions. They can't just throw up their hands. Everyone's got to be doing it together. Last, I am worried about the public safety issues related to panhandling or even encampment areas near busy intersections, because I called the city of Santa Fe authorities for a guy that was on Cerrillos Road that was laying down and then up and then laying down again in traffic. It's happened on my route to work and home. I've been chased and seen people chased. I don't mean like personally chased, but someone chasing our car doesn't know I'm in it.
Right,
so I don't mean me as the governor chased.
No,
but
just as a person.
just as a car in an intersection. This has to end because someone on the streets is going to get killed. A child is going to get killed. A motorist is going to get killed or kill someone.
Do you think you have a law that will pass constitutional muster? Because the problem with that is that the Supreme Court has said, asking for money is a form of free speech. You can't regulate it. And even with a public safety exception, are there any laws in the country that have held up?
There are laws that have held up, including the Espanola law, which has been held up in the 10th Circuit. So part of my dilemma here is, and I don't disagree with you, Inez, that the Supreme Court, and we do want to protect free speech.
They
have, and they've made gun violence hard. They've made a lot of stuff hard.
Yep.
But we have to keep threading the needle, because what we have, then we just abandon everybody else's right, constitutional right, to be safe and unfettered. So we think that we can thread that needle with these three issues in particular that allow us then to focus on the remaining supports and remedies: housing, income, the ability to provide meaningful behavioral health for people who couldn't get access. And right now, the HMOs in New Mexico are clear. They have 24 hours to move people in and out of treatment. They just have to do it. They have billions of their own dollars. They can create access points, and they're now going to be held accountable
One of the
here.
challenges that I think when you look at the whole homeless issue is that a lot of the people who are begging and the panhandlers are not the same people who are living unhoused or who are using the shelters.
I agree.
And I don't even know how you deal with that, because you still have a right to ask for money. But
I have an idea about that is not fully explored in the state of New Mexico, but maybe we can talk about this later as we fully explore it. There are a few communities in the country, so that's all done by local government, that say it is a business.
So
you have the right.
taxing them, or
You got to get a permit.
oh, that's
And so you make it free, because you would make one at least assumption that could be fair and valid is for folks choosing this line of work or the necessity for this line, their free speech issue. You don't want to create a barrier. So, but you go through a background check. Like all businesses, you got to meet their requirements. It's free. And these communities that are doing this then can regulate, like, say, it's not exactly the same thing, but like food trucks, so that they're not just on a corner, they're not interrupting traffic flows, they're not in a neighborhood where that's a problem. It's not
vendor program on the plaza or the busker.
You
get your
figure out
busker
where,
license,
and we do that. So I'm asking my policy folks to dig into that, and my legal team a little more. Again, I didn't put that in front of the legislature because I have insufficient information and evidence about how that would work. I don't know that I would put that in front of a special session, but I might put it in front of a 60-day session, maybe incentivizing it for local governments to start to look at that. And in a special session, I might have them look at also some additional, criminal penalty enhancements that didn't quite, like the felony in possession, that didn't get over the finish line because we were talking about that. But right now, here's where we are. I've got legislators working on these bills. I'm doing my vote count. I want a special session, not just so that we can message our potential agreements and disagreements. I want a special session that makes a difference for New Mexicans.
You want to get something done.
I want to get something done, and I think that that's where we're headed.
So how do you do that in negotiating with a minority party when they have no leaders at this point?
Harder, but I certainly had a conversation with both former minority leaders, one who resigned completely and one who's not seeking re-election, and got their opinions. And I appreciate them both. It's more challenging, but at least they're talking to their caucus members and friends and colleagues. So I know that information gets out. And we will invite Republican members to participate in the bill review and drafting with their Democratic leadership colleagues in preparation for the potential special session.
All right. Well, that sounds like there's a lot going on behind the scenes that will emerge when it's time. And we did not get back to the strategic water plan, so we'll have to have another meeting to discuss all the ways that we're going to get ready for the future in a climate changing world. And
well, I would really love that. There's so much to talk about. In New Mexico, we have our fair share of challenges, but we have a lot to be proud of. And in fact, I like reminding New Mexicans that I don't want to sound like I don't know that things are still hard for far too many families. But we have more of the pieces of a stronger family puzzle and component than any other state in the country. Only place where people are moving out of poverty. Only place where we continually are in the top 1 or 2 states for moving people out of food insecurity. Scratch cooking in schools, incentivizing really good healthy meals. We're not there today, but that is coming. Universal child care, free college, and really leaning into education to get the right results and better child well-being. I wish I could say it was all fixed. I guess I would talk myself right out of a job. It's not. But
then you could be the ceremonial governor and
there
go
you go,
like open
the ribbon
ribbons.
cuttings.
Yes.
But the underpinnings are all there, and they aren't there in most other places. And we should celebrate that with a recognition that we take our eye off the prize or the ball, and those underpinnings don't get fully realized. And I have no intention of doing that, which is why I push these legislators so hard. And to their credit, it's why they, in large part, continue to deliver for their constituents. Bipartisan.
Yes, that was actually something I noticed in the votes. There were a lot of things that weren't just Democrats have the majority, let's all vote. And I think that's why we have a meat inspector, and the program will start, and we can buy local meat and all eat healthier.
That's right, and I can't believe that failed the last 2 efforts. But we're building compromise in a model. I referred to that in the State of the State, the New Mexico model. People are paying attention to how are you getting those things done. And we're small enough still that we can have these conversations together. They're not all as polite as I would like them to be or as easy, but they're available. And in far too many places in America, they're not. And maybe we can take this incredible effort and show Congress, as an example, how they could make a difference in the lives of Americans by working better together, not just in constant opposition.
No, that makes sense. And we didn't even get to the campaign, which obviously you're going to be a big part of. You have said you want to work for President Biden, and there's some evidence that Trump is gaining ground among Hispanics, although I never know if that's actually real polling or some of the strange polling we've had in recent years. What are your plans if Biden gets reelected?
To do everything I can to make his second term successful, both in this job and whatever I can do as a private citizen. People want, I think, for me to say, I'm going to be X. I want to keep participating. I care about the things I'm working on now, and in a different role, I think you can work on them in different ways. And so we'll see what the future brings. But my job today is to get Biden reelected for all the obvious reasons, and then I want to keep building a better American future for everyone.
On that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week.